Hi, I'm Sue Glenn, and this is a lecture for ecology where we're going to learn how to do this point-centered quarter method for sampling trees in a very fast and efficient way. When we're looking at ways of looking at population density and studying forest structure, there's a lot of different methods out there. And sometimes you use aerial photos or surveys, but often you're having to go down and look at the individual tree on the ground and doing ground sampling. And really, you have two different types of categories of samples. You've got plot-based and plotless. So plot-based, you'd be doing something putting down a like 100 by 100 meter quadrat and counting all the trees in it. But that is a very time consuming method. Plotless methods involve measuring distances for a random sample of trees. So you're instead of counting everything, you're counting the sample. And normally you're walking along a line. So you're following a compass direction. We call the line a transect. And then as we move along that, we will be measuring characteristics of the trees. So the point center quarter is one of these plotless methods. So it's really a point base. At each point, we're going to be measuring 4 trees. The advantage is that it tends to be more efficient. They tend to be faster. They require very little equipment, require few workers. The main advantage, of course, is speed. The question then is if you're doing things quickly, is accuracy going to be sacrificed in the process? And so it is very good for getting a handle on what are the dominant trees in an area, but certainly not good for like if you're looking for an endangered species or something that's rare in the area. Uh, we will be using the data from this to calculate what's called an importance value for each species. So the importance value is going to be based on 3 different measures. The density, so how many trees per square kilometer, the size of each tree, and we're going to be doing by measuring the size of the trunk, and that gives you a measure of their dominance, and the frequency of each species. So since we have several points that we'll be doing, how many actual points do you find the tree? Is it widespread throughout the forest, or is only found in one little clump? So we will be, at each point, we're going to measure 4 trees at each point. And we're going to get the distance from the random point to the tree. We're going to get the size of the tree, and you're going to figure out the species of the tree. And that way we've got 3 pieces of data you're taking from each tree. Now you could use this for other plants as well. You have to just be able to identify the individual plants. So it doesn't work well for things like grasses where it's hard to tell where is the individual plant. But obviously a woody plant like a tree is going to work great. And we're going to use the definition of a tree having a diameter of at least 10 centimeters. So you're going to be looking at the larger trees and not worrying about the little saplings. This step's going to take you a little bit of preparation to do. So the first thing you do is take out of your lab kit, before you go outside or anything, you take out your lab book, the lab book Terrestrial Ecology. It's the red book in your lab kit. And you're going to turn to page 14 to read over the instructions for the lab, which includes telling you everything that you need to bring with you, plus what you're going to be doing there. So you're not going to be running into a situation where you've forgotten to bring things. The other thing I want you to do is to flip to the front of the book at starting on page 3 to 4. There's the safety section of the book, and read this over because you want to make sure that you're going to be safe. So read over the safety section of the lab book, and also read over the instructions for the lab. Now, you are going to be working in a forest, so you need to locate a forest that you're going to be able to use this. You're going to try to find a safe location in a forested area that you'd be able to walk 100 meters in a straight line without leaving the forest. and you don't want to be going up or down hills. You don't want to be walking across streams. You don't want to be going through private property. And you also don't want to be walking right along a trail. You want to get off the trail. Trails tend to impact the trees and the spacing of the trees, so you want to get off the trail area. Trails are also where the deer walk, and where there's deer, there's ticks, so you want to stay off of the trail for the stick because of the ticks. You want to make sure that before you even go out and start your sampling, that you have checked the weather forecast, because you want to make sure that there's no storms coming, that you're not going to get stranded somewhere. Make sure that you bring some water with you. You probably want your insect repellent. You want to make sure that you dress appropriately. You want to have like proper shoes and socks on, and long pants, because you don't want to get poison ivy on your ankles, and you don't want to get ticks crawling up onto you. So you want to make sure that you've taken all the precautions. So read over the safety section in the manual. One of the things you're going to do before you go is generate 5 random numbers. So what we're going to be doing, we're going to be measuring along your transect, along the direction you're walking, along your line. You're going to measure 5 random points, trees at 5 random points. In order to generate a random point, we need a random number. So you're going to generate 5 random numbers between 10 to 20. And that should give you enough distance between the points that you would be able to not be sampling the same trees at each point. Easiest way to generate a random number is just to find a random number app on your phone or your computer, and once you've generated your 5 random numbers, you can write them down in your lab book, and then you've got them with you so that you're able to use them as you do your sampling. So if you haven't got the random numbers generated beforehand, you can do it when you actually get out there in the field, and that way you've got the distances between your plots ready. Other thing to make sure, since you're going to be working out in a forest, charge your phone up. Make sure you've turned on your notifications for your weather app in case there's like a pop-up thunderstorm or something like that coming your way. And this is a lab, it would really help to have someone with you. So if you can find a family member or a helper, socially distance if you've brought somebody from outside the family, but you're measuring the distance from a point to a tree, and it really helps have somebody hold the other end of the tape measure. And then you're going to be measuring the girth of the tree. You're going to do the circumference with a tape measure. And some of these trees are big, and it might help to have somebody helping you with that as well. In your little red lab book, you will find a list of things that you're going to be bringing with you. So in your lab kit, you'll find that there's 4 little metal stakes. So you want to bring the metal stakes. There's a large tape measure, the 30-meter tape. There's the small 3-meter tape, the soft one. Your camera, probably your phone camera, is the easiest thing to do. What I do when I take pictures on my phone is I've actually downloaded the PowerPoint app onto my phone, and that way I put the pictures right there into a PowerPoint, load it onto my Google Drive, and then when I'm home, I've got my pictures right there in a PowerPoint on the Google Drive. I can use them from that way, or you can email them to yourself. You're going to need to be taking pictures because you're going to be putting them into your lab blog. You're going to need a compass, or you can use a compass app on your phone. So you might want to have that set up ahead of time. And then your own protection, you're going to wear sunblock, you're going to have a hat, have sunglasses, bring water, bring insect repellent if you want to bring some sort of a snack. You're going to be out there for a couple of hours. And then the 2 books that are in your lab kit you need to bring. One is a little green book called Tree Finder, and depending on what lab kits you have and what part of the country you are, it's going to be maybe a different color or a different title to the book. But we're using Tree Finder here in New Jersey, and then you're going to bring your red lab book as well, and a pencil, obviously, to write things down. Here's what your equipment's looking like. So you're going to have your red lab book with you. Bring a pencil along. I've just opened it up at the correct page. This lab starts on page 14. You're going to bring your 30-meter tape. So make sure you know how to use this. So you're going to flip the handle back so that you can pull out the tape. It's clipped. The end of the tape is clipped right here. And then once you've finished measuring, you can just roll that back up and then flip the handle back when you're going home. You've got your 3-meter tape right here. You've got your stakes. These stakes are really easy to lose track of. I put a little clip on them, but they can fall off the little clip, so you might want to check on that. And you could tie a ribbon on them. You could tie even a plastic bag on them just to make sure that if you walk away, you'd be able to see it again and go back and pick it up. And then you've got your tree identification book right here. Take some time and look at that tree identification book because you're going to have to be able to identify what your different tree types out there. There are also tree ID sites online that you might find useful on your phone, but this actually is a really nice book because it actually has a dichotomous key. So when you're opening up your book, and you might want to sit and read through it before you leave, because the second page explains how to go through to identify the tree. And then if you start on, what is that page right there? It's page 5. The dichotomous key starts there. So it's asking you if the tree has needles or if it has leaves, and that's going to determine what page you go to next. So if it has needles, we stay on this page, and then are the needles long, a half inch to 18 inches, or are they short and scale-like? So then depending on what choice you have, you're going to go down the page to that picture with the long needles, or you're going to go to page 13. It's all illustrated. It's packed full of information. Eventually, you'll get to a page where you can identify your actual species. So you need to be able to see the leaves. If you're having trouble identifying a species, take a picture of the leaves, take a picture of the bark, and you want to make sure that you look around the ground because you might find some leaves down on the ground. It's a lot easier to see the leaves lying on the ground than up in the way up in the top of the tree, and that way you can send them to me and see if you can get some sort of an identification on it as well. Uh, in your lab manual, then it asks you to take a picture of the forest that you're going to be going to, but it also is going to ask you to take a picture of each one of your species, and you're going to put that into your lab blog. So make sure that you take a picture of every species so that we make sure that everybody's calling the same thing a white oak, and that they've all got the same species that they are dealing with there. So make sure that you're photographing things as you go along. So we made the notebook nice and light and easy to carry around with you, so you can have it out and refer to it while you're out there. There's a list of instructions of what to do. Also, in bold, it tells you when to take a picture of what you're doing or where you are, and that is a good reminder for you. Also, in the lab book on pages 18 and 19, these are your data sheets. So on page 18, you're recording where you are, the date, the time of day, the temperature. You're going to put your random numbers that you generated there, what type of habitat you're in, describe the habitat, and you're going to photograph that. So make sure you have a photograph. And if you're on a hillside, what direction is the slope facing? Is it facing north or south, or east or west? And if you wanted to use your compass, you can actually come up with the degrees. And then you also want to figure out with using your compass, point down the direction that you're going to be walking and record the transect direction. So are you going north, south, east, or west? What direction are you walking? And then as you identify trees, you can list the trees here. You want to be consistent when you're inputting data, that you're using the same name for the same tree over and over again. So you make yourself a nice little list. This is your data sheet on page 19. And so we're going to be stopping at 5 different points, and at each point you're going to look at 4 different trees. They're going to be the closest tree to the point, 4 closest trees in, but you're going to divide it into 4 sections, 4 quarters. You're going to pick the closest tree in each quarter. You're going to write down the species name, the distance from the point to the tree, and the last column, which is covered over here, is the circumference of the tree. To start to find your first random point, then along your transect, you're going to take your first random number and you're going to walk that number of steps to your first point. Make sure you've already recorded the date, time, noted your location, take a picture, looking down your transect, and then you're at your first point. At your sample point, you can put down one of your stakes into the ground. So you can see I have a stake here sticking up from the ground. Maybe you can't see it. It's right there with the little ring at the top of it. So I have a stake put down here at the ground, and then I brought all 4 stakes with me, and that way I had other ones that I could actually, this was the direction I was walking, so I have one pointing in that direction, and then at a 90-degree angle I put the other one. So you make a little X marks the spot at your point. And you could just do that if you stand there and you're looking forward. You've got this line looking forward ahead of you, and then we got this line. If you stick your arms out to either side, you would have your little hands out going there. And so you've got 4 quarters. So what you're going to be looking for in each quarter is the closest tree. So I can call this one quarter 1. I'm just going to use Roman numerals. I'm using Roman numerals for the quarters, and that way you can tell what we're talking about. 3 and 4. It doesn't matter which one's number 1, which one's number 2. We don't really keep track, but we got 1, 2, 3, and 4 quarters. And what you're going to be determining is the closest tree to the point in quarter 1, and the closest tree to the point in quarter 2, closest tree to the point in quarter 3, and closest tree to the point in quarter 4. So we've just taken 1 point, but we're going to actually sample 4 trees, and they're going to be 4 different trees. So if you've got one, let's say the closest one in quarter 1, let's say it is up ahead right here, and it's kind of on the line, on the transect. Find another one then for quarter 2. So you want to make sure you've got 4 different trees that you're going to be sampling. So you select one of the quarters, and in that quarter you're going to locate the closest tree. We want to make sure that the trees have a minimum diameter of I think I said earlier 10 centimeters. That's pretty big. We're making it 4 centimeters, and that, so when we measure the circumference, so remember the difference between diameter and circumference. The circumference is the distance that we use with the measuring tape around the tree, whereas the diameter would be the distance across the tree. There's special tape measures they make, diameter tapes or DBH tapes, that would measure the diameter, but they're very costly, and so instead of that we're going to be measuring the circumference, because we can always calculate the diameter from the circumference if we needed to, but we'll be fine with circumference. So we're going to be looking at trees with a minimum circumference of 12.5 centimeters. So they're going to be larger than that. Um, and if we were doing diameter, that would be a 4 centimeter diameter. So you look in your quarter, you see what the closest tree is, and you're going to measure the distance from the point to that tree. If you don't have anybody to help you, you could use your little stakes to hold down one end of your measuring tape to measure that distance from the point to the tree. And it, it it can really be, if you want to try to get it to the nearest centimeter, that's fine. The nearest 10 centimeters is okay. Sometimes the wind is blowing and flipping your tape back and forth. You're going to be using your big surveying tape, so that's going to be your 30-meter tape for that one, and you're going to write down that number. Then you're going to pull out your tree finder and you're going to identify the tree using its leaves, take a picture, write down the name. If you just can't identify it, then take a look. Does it have needles or broadleaf? And then you're going to make up an unknown name for it. So use your last name first. So I would make Glen, and let's say it had broadleaf, so I would put Glen Broad. And if it's the first one, it's number 1. If it's the second one I can't identify, it's a different species, it'd be number 2. And make sure you submit a picture with that. You'll be putting these pictures and names up on your blog so that if other students are using your data, they can try to identify your tree. Then the third thing you're going to do is measure the size of the tree. And this is going to be used in order to measure the dominance of the tree species. So we're going to do this as a measure of the size of the tree, as the size of the trunk. And so we're going to do the circumference. Normally, you would do the diameter at breast height with a diameter tape or with a caliper. You've got a measuring tape that is nice and supple that you can use to spread around it. You're going to do the circumference at chest height. So we're calling that CCH. Chest height is about 130 centimeters above the ground. It's easy. You just reach out your hands. It's where you would hug the tree. Let me just give you a warning, though. If there's a vine growing up the side of your tree, it is probably poison ivy. You do not want to be touching poison ivy. Poison ivy gives you a rash. It's going to be an itchy rash that lasts you for 5 weeks. So if you have a tree that is covered in poison ivy, you can do one or two things. You could just hold up your tape measure and estimate the diameter, and then you can get the circumference from that, or you could pick the next tree. I don't want you getting poison ivy. It's not worth it for you to get poison ivy. So you're going to repeat this process for the 4 different trees at your point, and then you're going to once you finish that tree, you're going to take your next random number and you're going to walk that number of steps down to the next point on your transect and do 4 more trees. Don't forget to pick up your stakes though, and take those with you because you're going to need something to mark where your point is because you'll be measuring from that point. So sample 4 trees at each point. You're going to use the random numbers to figure out the distances between the trees. If you find that one of your trees at the next point is one you already sampled at the last point, let's say your trees are spaced out a lot, then move forward and use your next random number. You want to make sure you're not resampling the same trees. So since you have, in our lab, we're going to be doing 5 points and 4 trees at each point. So you're going to have a total of 20 trees, which is not a big data set. Normally we'd want to get 100 trees for something like this, but that's probably going to take you a couple of hours by the time you find your location and get everything set up and take your pictures and write everything down and identifying your trees as well. So that's going to give us sufficient data for us to do our calculations of importance values. I have set up an online form for you to submit your data. You can actually do it when you're out there if you want to, because you'll be able to access it from your phone. And you'll find the link to that on our e-learning site. And so you're going to enter each tree separately. So you submit the form 20 times, but it only takes a minute, like it doesn't even take a minute to put it in once. And so yeah, you can do that sitting at home or when you get back to your car, however you want. And all it is you put, like I'm in point one, I'm in quarter two, this is my tree species, this is its distance from the point to the tree, and this is its circumference. So whatever data is in your table is going into that. And then when you get home, go ahead and update your blog. So you want to be adding in the information on your blog, and you can take a look at my template to see. You're going to put your study site and your pictures, and you're going to update the blog when you get back. So make sure you get that done on the week you're doing the lab as well. So I think that uh, sort of sums up what you're going to be doing. It's a little bit complicated, so take a look, try it out, and drop me an email if you are running into some difficulties. Have fun.